Welcome to NASCAR Live 4 Lock right here at Awesemo.com. We are here to break down today's NASCAR race. Of course, as always on Sunday, we've got breaking news. We will get into that here in a moment. Which driver is going to the back of the field? Of course, we are brought to you, sponsored by Monkey Knife Fight. Head over to monkeyknifefight.com for their player prop-based contest. You can hit some of those contests up for NASCAR today, or maybe you want to play a little NBA with Monkey Knife Fight. You are in charge, and sign up with the promo code Awesemo. You'll get an instant first match deposit bonus of up to $50. And of course, if you do have any questions on today's NASCAR race, be sure to hop that over in the chat right now. We'll get to those questions, or if you're on a premium Slack account, you can throw your questions in there. Just make sure to mention me, and I will make sure to ask Chris about it. Chris, we always like to start off with roster construction. Well, I guess part of that conversation is about the news that came down about within the last half hour, the fact that Chase Elliott is going to the back of the field. He obviously was someone that we were looking at as a dominator. So what do we do with Chase Elliott?
Yeah, looking forward to today's show, Jason. But yeah, anyway, talking about Chase Elliott, the thing with him is I was viewing him as more of a tournament play rather than a cash play. So I think him going to the rear actually might help wanting to play him in tournaments, because it should reduce his ownership a bit. I didn't think his ownership was going to be anything too crazy anyway, because he's priced right between Martin Truex Jr. and Denny Hamlin, who are looking like they're going to be one of the more chalkier dominators of the entire slate. So Chase Elliott going to the rear doesn't change too much for me. I love that price tag today.
What I mentioned when we talk about roster construction, of course, we're all using Fantasy Cruncher to help develop our lineups. What is your thoughts about rules for today's Cruncher? I mean, obviously what I did was I set up a group of dominators where I wanted to get at least two of those drivers in every lineup. But for you, what was kind of, as you were developing your lineups, how did you set your rules?
Yeah, those are my exact rules as well. I went from Blaney and up as my dominators and set it to at least two, just like you did. And then I added one more group because when I was looking at my overall lineups, I did notice that it made a two scrub lineup using Josh Bilicki and Timmy Hill, which is not something I wanted. So I made sure I made that a max one, as we usually do.
Yeah, when I was putting together some lineups here this morning, and based on the conversation I had with Phil yesterday, as we were talking about roster construction, and it's like, okay, you only get at least two dominators. Okay, well, maybe get three. There is a path of roster construction to get through four dominators. Now, whether you're going to like those other two drivers or not is a different story.
Yeah, there actually is a path for it. I was surprised because I was running my projections earlier in the week. I saw one of the first lineups that came up was a four dominator lineup, and I was actually surprised it didn't look that bad, because the scrub drivers that it was using, it wasn't the Bilicki kind of guys. No BJ McLeods or Cody Wares. It was actually Anthony Alfredo and Corey LaJoie, and those aren't the worst drivers down low. So there is a path. You're using a lot of the 9K dominators, but it really isn't that bad this week.
We'll mention, Alex just put it over in our premium Slack channel, that projections and ownership is updated following the news of Chase Elliott. So if you are a premium member over Awesemo.com, that is updated. You can check that out as you are developing your lineups. In terms of a cash GPP play, I guess, and talking about roster construction, Austin Cindric is a guy that we have to talk about. Yesterday, Phil talked about how he liked him more as a cash play as opposed to a GPP play. What's your thoughts on Austin today?
I totally agree with that. I do like Austin Cindric quite a bit in both formats. I do think he's a better play over in cash games because he's starting back in 39th in a Penske car. Now, that does not mean I think he's going to run up front with guys like Logano, Keselowski, or Blaney, but I do think he can put up a similar kind of day to maybe MDB, maybe just a minus a few a little bit. But with a guy with top 20 upside starting near 40th place, you got to have to play him in cash games. Now, in tournaments, there's a lot of good pivots in that 8K range. You have Kurt Busch, Tyler Reddick, Alex Bowman, even William Byron's just a little bit above that. So in tournaments, I do not hate being underweight Austin Cindric, just to get some more maybe guys with maybe better dominator upside rather than Cindric.
I mean, this is the thing with Cindric, has got to be, what is the ceiling for him?
I personally think a top 15 is getting close to the ceiling. I don't think he's going to be a top 10 guy today. I know he's great in the Xfinity Series, one of the best drivers there, and he's got good equipment. But again, it's his first time in the Cup Series at Atlanta, so it's different than racing guys in the Xfinity Series. So I'd say more like a top 15 is the ceiling.
What do you do with him in a single entry?
I'm going to personally play him And I can still get 3 Dominators and get Cindric in and still not have a bad looking lineup down low. Like, you can use Alfredo, but you're still not using like a double scrub lineup. So I don't even hate using 3 Dominators with probably a cheaper Dominator than throwing in Cindric as well.
Yeah, in terms of that single entry, I mean, do you think the best route to go is a 3 Dominator build?
Yeah, looking at the previous optimal lineups, I believe the last 3 races were 3 Dominator builds. And with how cheap the Dominators are today, I think we're going to see that once again.
Yeah, and one of the Dominators that Phil talked about yesterday, I know you talked about it on the shows you've done this week, is Kyle Larson. You mentioned about what the odds were for him to win the race, which was third best. I think at one time, I think it's a little lower now, but it was plus 650, and what he's done here. Is Kyle Larson your favorite Dominator?
Yeah, just to go on about the betting, I believe he's up to 450 now. So he's right up there with Kevin Harvick. He's one of the favorites to win this race. But personally, Kyle Larson is my favorite Dominator today, even over Kevin Harvick, as crazy as that sounds, how good Harvick's been. But what we've seen from Kyle Larson in the 5 car, he looks like maybe the championship favorite right now, as fast as that car is. He went through the field 3 times last week. I know I'm not comparing last week to this week. It's just that car is bad fast. And last time he raced at Atlanta in the 42 car, which is slightly worse equipment, maybe not slightly worse, a little bit worse equipment, he led over 140 laps. So I think in the 5 car, he's going to be a force to be reckoned today.
Yeah, when you look at some of the other Dominators, obviously you mentioned about, Blaney and up of what you were looking at there. Let's start off with Kevin Harvick, starting 7th, 11,000 on DraftKings, 14,000 on FanDuel. Phil mentioned about weather was something to look at here in terms of when you're looking at rostering Kevin Harvick. What's your overall thoughts on Harvick today?
Yeah, going on with the weather there, it's going to be a little cooler, which should help Kevin Harvick a bit because he can grip that bottom. When they call it the Kevin Harvick line, because he can get low and just grip that and just, as they call it, Harvicking. I mean, it's pretty good when you have your own verb at a certain track. That's how you know you're pretty good at a certain track. But yeah, I like Harvick a bit. He's led nearly 50% of laps we've had at Atlanta the past 6 races. It's absolutely insane. I will say I've been a little bit lower on Kevin Harvick so far to start the season, but this is kind of my breaking point where I'm actually going to play quite a bit of Kevin Harvick today. But if he can't get it done here, it might be time to start giving that Kyle Busch treatment that we had last year, where we kind of just start getting lower on him until we actually see it happen.
When you look at some of the other drivers who are here at the top here, you got Brad Keselowski, 10-2 on DraftKings, Denny Hamlin, who's on the pole at 10,000, Martin Truex Jr., 9,600, Logano, 9,400, and then Blaney, 9,200.
Yeah, Martin Truex Jr. is actually one of my favorite Dominators to pair with Kyle Larson today. And I know it's kind of weird because he's starting right beside Denny Hamlin. I typically go with the guy starting on the pole, but I actually like Martin Truex Jr. over Denny Hamlin straight up today. I know Phil does as well. And I was reading over his article, and it's just one thing, it's a price thing. And it's also, he's been fantastic at Atlanta. I mean, some of the best numbers right behind Kevin Harvick. And I can't get past that price point. He was great here last year. He's a 1.5 mile wizard. I mean, he's typically really good at these track types, good at the high tire tracks last year. So I'm definitely on Truex at that price point.
Of course, every Saturday, myself and Phil do the strategy show. If you ever are unable to watch us live on early Saturday afternoon, it is a part of the Awesemo Podcast Network. Just go to awesemo.com/podcast to find the favorite podcast that you are looking for. And of course, leave a 5-star rating and review on any of our podcast channels. Leave your Twitter handle or your email address for your chance to win a free week of Awesemo Plus Platinum. One winner will be awarded every Friday, and reviews are eligible to win up to 1 year. Of course, that's a great way to way I check out all of our content over here at awesemo.com. Phil had a tweet earlier today where he was talking about his Dominators. I was actually kind of surprised on how low he was on Denny Hamlin.
Yeah, I was too. I'm not a big fan of Denny Hamlin today, but I think he was talking 5-10%. I know he said he might bump that up, and I didn't see an update on that, but I definitely think it was pretty low because Denny Hamlin was one of the best drivers at the high tire wear tracks last year. So I'm not going to be that low on Hamlin. My plan is to match the field on him because the pole sitters just have not been that great for us for fantasy ever since we had the COVID thing start. So until we really see it and have practice, it's kind of hard to trust it.
Yeah, so this was what he had this morning. Harvick 50%. This is he goes in a 20 max, by the way.
Okay.
Harvick 50%, Larson 50%, Bowman 50%. Blaney 45, Truex 45, Koslowski 35, Elliott 25, Byron 25, Hamlin 5. Obviously, he's going to change it with because of the news on Chase Elliott. What's your take on William Byron?
I like William Byron because of what we've seen at Homestead, which is a similar track to Atlanta. It's got that high tire wear. It's also a mile and a half track. Plus, he's in a Hendrick car, which we've kind of been in on them all season long. They've shown a ton of speed. So William Byron, I do like him in tournaments. Now, I'm not as high as as Byron today, but I still like him a decent bit in tournaments because the price tag should keep people off of him. Because for $200 more, you can get Ryan Blaney, who's a more obvious dominator. Then right below him, you got Alex Bowman, Cindric, Reddick. So I do like him as a tournament play under the radar guy.
In terms of the Dominator that maybe you have the most concern with as a Dominator, say, who would that be?
Kyle Busch. I like him as a place differential Dominator hybrid, but I don't think he's really going to lead laps today. I think he could be a top 5 guy, which isn't going to kill you in fantasy today, but I don't think he's going to get up front and have that high ceiling of 100 some points, unless he happens to get up front. He was great here last year at Atlanta, got a top 5 finish, had one of the best overall cars. But when I ask myself, do I see him dominating over a guy like Kevin Harvick, Larson, Keselowski? I always tell myself no. So I do have a hard time seeing him dominate and reach his full potential at nearly $11,000.
By the way, Phil just messaged me over in Slack. He's at 25% Denny Hamlin.
We're pretty close then.
Yeah. You mentioned about place differential. We'll kind of move on to there. We already talked about Austin Cindric starting 39th. A driver that Phil had mentioned about liking, Tyler Reddick, who's in the 29th position.
Yeah, you could play them both together, but if you're not planning on doing that, I like Reddick as a pivot directly off of Austin Cindric. Obviously, he has way more Cup experience now that he's in his second year, and he was typically a top 15, top 10 contender at the mile and a half tracks last year. Had some decent runs at the high tire wear tracks, so I have no problem at all with Tyler Reddick today. I like the price point, and he should have lower ownership than Cindric. Yeah,
looking at kind of going down the salaries. We talked about Ryan Newman yesterday. Ryan may not always be a guy you want to trust, but he is starting 28th today.
Yeah, I brought him up in the Awesemo article this week as one of my favorite cheaper plays. He's cheaper over on FanDuel, so it's a little bit more appealing there, but you can certainly still play him on DraftKings at $7,100. He's been pretty good at the high tire wear tracks. Numbers at Atlanta aren't too bad. Typically a top 15 guy for the most part. He's a veteran, he knows how to manage his tires, so I like him quite a bit, even though he killed you last week.
Who are some of the other place differential drivers that you're intrigued by today?
So there's none that really stand out too much between like the Tyler Reddick and Austin Cindric, but it's just some guys to quick hit on. I like Cole Custer. I know he's been killing us, but starting near 30th place. Obviously Ryan Newman, Chase Briscoe, Rosh Chastain. Those are kind of like the main place differential guys. You could throw in Alex Bowman starting 14th, but I feel like he's more of a finishing position guy rather than place differential.
Now, when you talk about core plays today, I guess let's start over on the cash side. It's got to be Austin Cindric, right? He's got to be up there with the core play.
Oh, for cash games, certainly. In tournaments, I like to pivot away, but in cash games, I think you have to play Cindric.
In terms of GPP, who is in that core discussion?
Am I going to sound biased? Ryan Blaney. I like Ryan Blaney a lot. He's way too cheap at $9,200, and he was in the optimal lineup last year here at Atlanta. His car got stronger when the track got cooler temperatures today. He's been the mile and a half king speed-wise the past year or so now, so I don't see why that's not going to continue.
Is there a core play over on FanDuel? Just maybe based on price?
Austin Cindric's a lot cheaper over on FanDuel. I remember writing up in the Awesemo article and saw the price tag difference. I really like getting the Cindric on FanDuel because I believe he's in that $6,000 range. So it's a lot easier to fit in rather on DraftKings because on DraftKings, he kind of costs you a Dominator. On FanDuel, that's not the case.
Mention this question that we just got in Slack about Austin Cindric. Says, what are some good multipliers play on Superdraft? Cindric at 2 times and 3 times for captain seems enticing.
Oh, for sure. Because starting 39th, the guy can pick up seriously around 20, 25 spots today. So I definitely like that multiplier.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about Cindric yesterday of just how much is too much.
I think if you want to play a safer route, you could start pushing 37% in 150 max tournaments. But I kind of like being underweight on that because if you're going that high, you're going to cost yourself some Ryan Blaney, Alex Bowman, William Byron lineups, who I think are excellent tournament pivots. So I'm kind of sitting around that 20, 30% range today.
Now, when we talk about value plays here, let's just look under 7,000 on DraftKings. You mentioned about Anthony Alfredo with somebody that has stuck out to you. Alfredo starting 32nd, 5,500 on TK, 4,000 over on FanDuel. Who are some other value plays that we need to be looking at today?
So I like Corey LaJoie as well. He's kind of a direct pivot off of Anthony Alfredo. We know he has top 25 upside, hasn't had the greatest start to the season, but if you don't want to get below Alfredo, I think Chris Buescher's a pretty good value play. He's had some strong runs so far this year. We know he's got top 20 upside, and he just seems way too cheap at $6,000. Like, he's only $400 and $200 more than Ryan Preece and Justin Haley, and those guys don't really have a ton of top 15 upside, unlike Chris Buescher. So I like Chris Buescher for cheap. It looks like ownership projections have him actually being pretty high owned as well. Also think we can go back to that Stenhouse who's been a top 15 guy for the most part. Also pretty good at Atlanta as well.
Yeah, I mean, that was the thing we talked about Ricky yesterday, just starting 12th of kind of, the path to being optimal, in terms of where he's at.
Yeah, similar to last week, he was starting pretty close to the front. And I think we had the same exact discussion. I said he's going to have to nearly hold his ground. If he gain a spot or even losing a spot, it's not the worst thing in the world at his price point. Now he's $800 more expensive this week, so it's a little bit of a harder path, but I think he can stay within the top 15. He has an average running position inside the top 15. And just looking at the heat map here, if he happens to hold his ground or maybe even lose a couple spots, we're still looking at around 30 to 25 points at 6,300, which is really not that bad.
All right, here's some updates on drivers that are going to the rear. Already knew about Elliott 2 times for tech failure. Timmy Hill 3 times for tech failure. Quinn Hoff unapproved adjustments. They all go to the rear. Timmy Hill also will have a pass-through and lose its car chief for failing 3 times.
And it's always nice when the other guys going to the rear are the ones that you really just have no interest in back there. Plus, they're already starting in the rear.
If you're putting Timmy Hill and Quinn Hoff in your lineup, obviously you're trying to go for the 4 Dominator build.
Yes.
But there is part of you just says, maybe you just got to start over.
Especially with Timmy Hill having to do a pass through. I mean, that guy's going to be dead as soon as the race starts.
Just hit clear and just start over.
Oh yeah,
with your lineup.
For sure.
In terms of, we'll get into some listener questions here momentarily. Of course, appreciate everyone that's in here on a Sunday afternoon. Be sure to subscribe to Awesemo right here on YouTube. Hit that notification bell so you know when a new show is live here on the channel. Of course, our NBA coverage today will start at 5 p.m. with NBA Deeper Dive, as I'll be joined by Terry to break down the games. And of course, Live Before Lock will be 1 hour after us at 6 p.m. Eastern time for EMAC and Greg. Of course, also be sure if you want to get access to all the premium tools and content we have over at Awesemo.com, sign up for an Awesemo weekly pass. $29.95 gets you all the sports we have over at Awesemo.com. And if you just want a NASCAR weekly pass, get that for $9.95. One of the things that I do on our NASCAR coverage, and you see it right there on the screen of how you can sign up for an Awesemo Plus membership, is what I do is I'm looking at that top driver tool and I'm looking at Dominator points as I was trying to build those 3, and I did try to build a 4 Dominator. Dude, wasn't necessarily loving what I was getting to on the bottom end of that, but that is something to definitely check out. Awesemo.com/join. You see there on the screen of how you can sign up for a NASCAR pass. But let's get into some listener questions. Of course, so you can throw those over in our premium Slack channel or right here on YouTube. Jeff goes Logano and Reddick or Blaney and Cindric.
Oh, I'll get Blaney and Cindric.
It doesn't say whether it's cash or GPP though.
It wouldn't matter either way for me.
Okay. I know I saw a couple questions asking about Ryan Newman. I know we kind of briefly touched on him. I guess talk about him as a GPP versus a cash play.
I almost feel like he's a better cash play this week, even though he absolutely burned you last week. But starting back in 28, this is a guy that has top 15 upside at these high tire wear tracks. I think he's fine in both formats. He's very safe in cash, but there is some pivots in tournaments like Eric Jones, Chase Briscoe, Rosh Chastain, and right above him, Austin Dillon and Bubba Wallace, who will probably finish above Ryan Newman. They just don't have that place differential upside. So a very safe cash play today.
FanDuel cash question coming in from Jeff. Kyle Busch or Ryan Blaney?
I want to say Ryan Blaney, but it's going to be Kyle Busch.
In a particular reason why?
Just starting further back, and I feel that they can finish in a similar position.
Jay says Michael McDowell top 5 today?
I don't think so. If you want to put a bet on that, you'll get some very good odds, but I don't think that is going to happen today.
Do you like Tyler Reddick as a cash/tournament play?
Yeah, I feel like he's better suited in tournaments just because most people are going to flock to Austin Cindric. I'm not sure if you're going to be able to fit in both of those guys, but I like him in either format if you can make it work.
Mr. Moneybag says, this is for a DraftKings GPP single entry. Last guy in, Buescher, Priest, or Alfredo?
Alfredo's the safest option there starting further back, but overall points wise, I think Buescher has the higher ceiling because I feel like he's got the highest finishing position potential there.
Yeah, and I think also that's where you also got to look at ownership and kind of see where can you get some leverage that might get you across the field.
Yeah, and if your lineup's already looking contrarian, then you could take the safer option to balance it out.
I mean, that's got to be the thing. What is the leverage play? Let's say you're doing 3 Dominators. Who are the 3 Dominators that you may be able to get some leverage on the field?
I think Keselowski is one of them. I know I don't even think we've talked about Keselowski yet, but this is actually, this is one of his best tracks. Like looking at the optimal lineups recently, the past 6 races, it's typically Kevin Harvick and Brad Keselowski. Keselowski's actually won 2 of the past few races we've had here, some of the best overall numbers, the second best average finish. So, I mean, if no one's talking about Keselowski and if he's going to be lower owned, I like him quite a bit in tournaments. He's looked pretty good at the 1.5 mile tracks we've had so far this year. Also, Chase Elliott, with him going to the rear, looking at Alex's updated ownership projections, he's looking pretty darn low. And I don't think it's going to matter too much with him going to the back, because I was thinking either Hamlin or Truex would lead the laps early on anyway. So by the time he gets back up there, $9,800, if he's going to be that low owned, I like that a lot.
Michael says, what are your thoughts on FanDuel specifically to get away from Cindric and have some salary to pay up for another Dominator, pivoting to someone like Suarez or Priest to fit in another Dominator?
I don't hate that strategy. Obviously, it's not going to look as good when you start building the lineup, but if you want to get off of that ownership, I totally get it, because Cindric is definitely going to be someone that's going to be very popular today because of that place differential upside. But if you want to get the extra Dominator in there for the tournament upside, I'm not against that. I'm going to do that a lot myself today, personally.
Rich over our slide count says, is Newman a cash play, and can you use Cindric and Newman in cash together?
You can certainly do that. I think that's going to be a very popular combo in those price ranges. I assume a lot of people are going to go to Cindric and then Newman down in that low 7K, upper 6K range. So that's what I was personally looking at for my main lineup as well.
How many Dominators is too much for Superdraft?
It's going to be similar on all sites for me. It's what we typically see of these kind of builds.
Yeah. How do you feel about Logano in terms of a Dominator today?
I think that's another guy we haven't talked about yet, but he's not that bad at Atlanta, and Logano is one of the best drivers in the field, and he's only $9,400. So to me, I don't love Logano today, but I love his price point. So I will be playing him because of that price. Not my favorite Dominator, but when someone's that low with his potential, you just have to get him in some lineups.
Bowman or Byron, DraftKings GPP?
Very good question. I've had that question to myself a lot today. I'm siding with Bowman because he's a little bit cheaper and starting further back. And I feel like their upside is very similar. One thing about Bowman at similar tracks to the high tower tracks, I mean, Auto Club and Chicagoland, he actually dominated them both and won both of those races the last time we've had them. They're no longer on the schedule, but I like them quite a bit.
Yeah, $200 price difference between them two on DraftKings.
Yep.
Jeff would like to know what your thoughts about Tyler Reddick as a FanDuel cash option.
Yeah, he's starting so far back. I think he's perfectly fine. I believe I wrote him up in the Awesemo article as well. I like him in both formats, not too expensive over on FanDuel. So starting 29th with the guy that has top 10, top 15 upside, he's certainly in play.
Gabby says, I'm trying to stay away from Briscoe and Chastain. Am I crazy?
I don't think you're crazy. I personally like their price points and where they're starting. So I have a little bit of them. I feel like they're almost more tournament plays, but I mean, I wouldn't be against them because they're kind of those hit or miss drivers where they could have a good run, but they could also wreck out, especially Chastain.
Kurt Busch over Kyle Busch today?
It's a massive price difference. I don't personally have like a Kyle Busch versus Kurt Busch dilemma because of that price difference, but I would take Kyle over Kurt if price doesn't matter.
Single entry DraftKings GPP, Larson or Truex?
I like the price point on Truex, but overall Larson is my favorite Dominator today.
In a 4 Dominator build, would you go Larson and Byron, or Hamlin, Logano, and a single entry GPP?
I like the Larson Byron there, and plus you're banking on the Hendrick cars to have speed, so you're kind of doubling up there as well. So I think that makes sense.
Is Elliott still good for GPP?
I think he's even better now for GPP, especially looking at the updated ownership projections. He's way too low in my opinion.
In terms of, I guess the question is how quickly could he get back to the front?
I think within the competition caution on lap 25, I think he could start sneaking inside that top 15, top I'm not sure if he'll get into the top 10, but I think by the end of stage 1, he should be right there in the top 10 as long as his car doesn't suck in traffic today.
Would it shock you if Kyle Busch makes the top 5?
No, he was pretty good here in last year in Atlanta. He was in the top 5. I would not be shocked. But he's just going to have to dominate at his price point to pay it off.
Jones, Briscoe, or Chastain?
The guy I had the most of in that price range is Rosh Chastain. Eric Jones, if he was in the 20 car, I would love him right here. Unfortunately, in the 43 car at $7,000, I feel like he's going to finish close to where he's starting. And Chastain in the 42 car, I feel like might have the... So it's really tough between him and Briscoe because I feel like they're going to finish close in the same range. So I guess I would say Briscoe with better projection play, but I do have more Chastain today.
Every time I see Eric Jones come up in a crunch for me, I'm like, ugh. I just don't know if I want to go there.
It's so tough in the 43 car now. It really is hard to trust.
Yeah, I mean, you've mentioned. I think we had this conversation last week of just about driver versus equipment and how do you kind of gauge that.
And this is one of those tracks where it's going to be 500 miles, so equipment's definitely going to come and play. That's why I'm a little bit concerned about Eric Jones today because he's no longer in the Joe Gibbs equipment. So that's the little iffy thing here.
Chase would like to know, Harvick and Larson, can they both get top 5s?
Oh, I mean, those are the two favorites today to win the race. So I'd be shocked if they're not in the top 5 today.
Jay goes, thoughts on Ricky Wreck, which we all know what that means.
The price came up a little bit, but he's actually been good this season. He's not wrecking out. So we might have to get rid of that nickname of him and stop slandering his name. But he's been looking pretty good this year. I like the price point, and I don't like where he's starting, but he can hold a top 15.
What's your thoughts about Matty D today?
He's not someone I am getting a lot in my crunches. I don't know about you personally, but starting 20th, the numbers at Atlanta are awful here, but you got to throw those out the window because the majority of those races were in pretty bad equipment. For the most part, he's a top 15 guy at these track types. The problem is the guys he's priced around. He's priced right around Kurt Busch, who I like a lot in tournaments, Tyler Reddick, Austin Cindric, Alex Bowman. So it's really hard to get to him when the other guys are priced around him are a lot better plays, in my opinion.
Bowman or Byron, we kind of touched on this a little bit. Looking over on the FanDuel side of the equation, 10,000 for Byron, 8,500 for Bowman.
Yeah, I think it's easily Bowman for me on that side, especially with that price difference. I like him on both sides. Bowman better.
Can you play Newman in a FanDuel GPP and be comfortable with it?
I'd feel pretty comfortable with that. Starting so far back, he can definitely gain you some spots today.
Larson and Blaney, or Harvick and Hamlin on DraftKings?
I like the Larson and Blaney side there.
Elliot or Truex Jr.?
Truex now, especially because Elliott's in the rear.
Yeah. Busch or Priest okay as two low value plays, or grab the value of Alfredo and LaJoy?
Yeah, those guys are both fine. I have a decent chunk of ownership in them. I feel like they have higher finishing position upside than guys like Alfredo and LaJoy today.
Phil mentioning that Austin Dillon may be having some engine issues as we speak.
Well, we'll definitely need an update on that because if his engine's not going to fire, I got to get rid of him in some lineups.
I did see a little note on that. There was seemed to be a little bit of an issue going on with him. But appreciate Phil hopping in and letting us know that. Jacob would like to know about Christopher Bell, and I know we kind of talked about this before the show started. He's starting 8th, 7,800 on DK, 9,500 on FanDuel.
FanDuel price is pretty crazy, in my opinion. He's definitely more playable over on DraftKings. Now, the problem is he's starting inside the top 10. I feel like he's finishing right around where we'd hope for him to finish most days. So his upside is definitely capped, but he's in great equipment. He's a very talented driver. I don't think you should get anything over 15% Christopher Bell today. I like him in tournaments because people aren't going to want to click on his name, but he's kind of a meh play to me today.
I think we answered this question before, but we'll get to it. Just I've seen it come up a couple times. Logano and Reddick, or Blaney and Cindric?
Blaney and Cindric for me, both formats.
In a 20 max, I'm getting 90% Truex and Alfredo. Is that way too much?
I personally think it is, because if Denny Hamlin just takes over and leaves those other laps and Truex can get back up front, you're probably wasting a lot of your lineups today.
Yeah. DraftKings single bullet, Harvick and Bowman, or Kyle Busch and Blaney?
Harvick and Bowman for me. I feel like Harvick's the most likely guy out of all the four we mentioned to dominate.
What's your thoughts on Daniel Suarez today?
I feel like he's a little priced up in my opinion. I really like getting down to the Stenhouse, Chris Buescher range over Suarez. Plus, for $100 more, you can get a guy like Rosh Chastain and a few $100 more for Chase Briscoe. So I'm not really landing on much Daniel Suarez at all today.
Of course, when you're looking at those top DFS leaderboards, you're seeing that Awesemo avatar, and it's for a good reason. If you rock our avatar on your DFS profile, you'll win a free month of Awesemo Plus when you place within the top 3 of any GPP of 5,000 plus entries. You can just simply Google search Awesemo avatar for instructions of how to download that image to rock that on your DFS profile. You can see it right there. As Jordan's getting it up on the screen, that you can see how you can download that Awesemo avatar so you can rock it on your DFS profile. Thoughts on Cole Custer? I know you briefly touched on him a little bit. Obviously, there's been some struggles there this year in terms of DFS, but what's your take?
Yeah, he's definitely been killing me the past, I feel like, month or so now. And he was a lot cheaper. Now he's nearly $8,000. So I'm not, if he was still in that 6K range like last week, I think there's a good chance he'd be one of my higher owned drivers. Now that he's nearly $8,000, I don't see myself going there too much. I'm sitting in that 10 to 15% range for Custer today, which I feel is a decent amount of him because he's got top 15, maybe even top 10 upside if he happens to have a really good race because he's in good equipment. It's just definitely been hard to trust in the past couple of weeks, but he's certainly in play for me in tournaments.
Last piece in, Bowman or Cindric. Does not say whether it's GPP or cash, though.
Oh, if it was, okay, I'll give it this way then. If it was GPP, I'd say Bowman and cash Cindric.
Yeah. I mean, my thing on Austin Cindric is if you're not rostering him or you have very little, you're praying this guy just does not get a top 15 finish.
You need some tire issues, speeding penalties, all of that.
Yeah, that could be a little. You could sweat that one out a little bit. This is a cash question. Newman and Reddick or Blaney and Suarez?
The Newman Reddick side, a little bit safer.
Sean says, he goes, I have 5 lineups today. Harvick and Larson are the core 2.
I have nothing against that. Those are the two, favorites to win this race. And I know Harvick hasn't really shown it this year, but this is his track. He's led like 50% of laps here, like every single week. It's Kevin, every single time we're at Atlanta, it's Kevin Harvick up front dominating. So I would not be surprised if he returns to his old Harvick ways today. And the people in Vegas are smart people. They have him as a favorite to win. So I'm not willing to full fade Harvick today by any means.
And of course, if you're just joining us, Chase Elliott has gone to the rear for 2 times of a tech failure. The other one's going to the rear, Timmy Hill, Quinn Hoff. That doesn't
Nope.
I mean, just
no way. Nope. And they're already in the rear anyway. So
look, if I'm doing my crunches and I see those 2 guys come up, all right, now let's move past that crunch.
100%.
Question over our premium slide count. This is a great question. Where do you draw a line with your scrub groups of Max 1 DraftKings GPP?
Oh, so that would be right below Core the Joy today. So James Davison and down is my scrub group.
Yeah. I think it was last week James Davison was coming up a ton for me.
Yeah.
I know this is always a popular question. Okay to leave salary on the table. I think the question is what is too much salary?
I'll see if I can pull up my fantasy cruncher build and sort it by my lowest salary. I don't know if you've looked at that yet so far, but if I sort it by salary, it looks like the lowest I am looking at. So there's a lot of lineups that are using $50,000 full salary. So I don't think this is going to be a day that I'm going to want to leave a ton of salary on the table. So the lowest I actually have is 49.5, it looks like. So I'm definitely trying to use a lot of my salary today.
Yeah, I would just think that if you're going to a 3 Dominator build, it's going to be kind of tough not to spend a majority of your salary.
And this is a track you want those Dominators. Like if you're just playing strictly place differential, you're not going to do well today. You need those Dominators up top. So you should be using a good chunk of your salary.
Thoughts on Michael Mcdowell?
Not a big fan of Mcdowell today. He's priced right beside Chris Buescher. I'd rather just get right to Chris Buescher. McDowell's history here at Atlanta hasn't been that great, and he's just kind of starting a little far up for me.
DraftKings GPP, Newman and LaJoy or Briscoe and Alfredo?
I will go with the first option there with Newman.
Blaney or Truex for a GPP on DraftKings?
Since it's GPP, I'll go with Blaney because it looks like his ownership is going to be quite a bit lower than Truex today.
How many Chase are we taking now?
Chase Elliott, that would be?
Yeah.
So I was originally getting close to around 30% today because I wanted to be overweight on Chase Elliott because I thought he was a pretty good tournament play because his ownership didn't look that crazy, and he actually had the best average green flag speed at the high tire tracks last year. I bumped that down closer to the 20% range, but don't be too scared about Chase Elliott going to the rear. We've seen many times where a driver goes to the rear. They still probably have a pretty fast car. They can get up there quick.
Yeah, I mean, if you get to that first competition caution, what if he's already in the top 10 at that point?
Then he's right back to where he would have been, really. And you were already expecting someone else to dominate early on anyway, so it didn't really change much anyway.
Yeah. I just think it's sometimes when we see that going to the rear, you initially think, oh, I gotta transition to somewhere else. Yeah,
and then when we actually watch the race and we see them just fly through the field, you're kicking yourself because you faded them.
Gabby says, does this race have a lane pick for restarts, or is that only certain races?
This will be one of those races with it.
Okay. Is Eric Jones a good play? We kind of talked about Eric Jones there a little bit. It's like, it's got to be a buyer beware because of the equipment. And you brought up the great point of, hey, it's 500 miles.
Yeah, I mean, if you're just looking at his numbers, not taking into account that he's a new equipment, the guy's been a top 15 guy here, but now that he's in the 43 car. If we look at Bubba Wallace's numbers here at Atlanta, if I can pull it up quick. Yeah, Wallace, he finishes up 21st, 27th, and 32nd. Now, I think Eric Jones is going to put up better numbers, but even then, I feel like his upside's around the top 15.
If Harvick is 50% owned and doesn't return to Harvick ways, that give us a huge advantage if we don't roster him.
Oh, big time, because he's $11,000. And if he doesn't happen to dominate, we're probably talking a guy like Larson, Keselowski, guys below him dominating. So you can definitely get leverage there.
Who are your preferred dominators for a DraftKings cash?
So my three favorite today overall, I guess it would be in cash games as well, is Kyle Larson, Martin Truex. That's my favorite pairing. And if you go the 3-dom route, I like getting Blaney in there as well.
Yeah, I got to pull up the note that Phil had on Larson from the other day that, it was where he had mentioned about the betting odds on him. I'll find it here. Oh, here it is. So this was when he was at 650, third best odds, but you mentioned about the odds have gone down a little bit. Led the most laps 2 years ago at Atlanta, has shown a knack for running well at high tire wear tracks, and fourth and first in the 550 horsepower package thus far.
Yeah, he's been killing. I was looking at the mile and a half numbers we had. It's only a 2-race sample size, but Larson is pretty much first in almost every category. So I'm just buying in on the speed here, and he looks like the car to beat so far this year.
Thoughts on BJ McLeod versus Alfredo and LaJoie?
Definitely not going to go the BJ McLeod route. I mean, he's not even close to the other guys like Alfredo and LaJoie. I know Alfredo and LaJoie aren't the best drivers out there, but I can't justify going McLeod over those two.
FanDuel GPP, Harvick or Truex?
I like going Truex there. I think he's more likely to dominate today. As crazy as that sounds at Atlanta, but I do like Truex.
Samuel says, go back to the well on Stenhouse with the elevated price or a better tournament play in that same price range.
I think he can go back to the well, and I don't think the price is too elevated because last week, I mean, that was just a weird pricing on Stenhouse. I'm not sure why he was only $5,500. I feel like this is a very fair price point for Stenhouse. So I definitely don't mind going back to the well.
Ryan brings up a different viewpoint on Austin Cindric. He goes, I feel like the field is miscalculating the value on Cindric. He's not that good historically at Atlanta, and he's almost 9K. Yes, there's value, but it's not a lock in GPP at all or even in cash.
I do disagree with the cash. I think you do have to play him in cash, but in tournaments, I am fully on board with that. There's a lot of pivots there where you can make, but in cash games, at his ownership, what it should be in cash, if you don't have him and he gets a top 20 finish, you're probably looking pretty rough in cash games, but in tournaments, there's a lot of pivots.
Thoughts on a 3-dominator GPP of Larson, Koslowski, and Byron?
I like that quite a bit. I'm not like a big fan of putting in Byron in my dominator group, but from what we saw at Homestead, he can certainly be one of those guys. So I'm not against that.
I know someone had asked about your how much Austin Dillon you have. Obviously, that could change if there's engine issues.
I was sitting at around 10 to 15%. He's good at these 1.5 mile tracks. I don't like where he's starting, but I think he can hold his position or get a top 10. So it's kind of the range I'm sitting in.
Of course, if you do have any questions, line those up in our premium Slack channel or right here on YouTube. Of course, if you are not subscribed to Awesemo, be sure to subscribe to the channel right here on YouTube. Hit that notification bell so you know when a new show is live on the channel. Of course, do us a favor, hit that thumbs up, but make sure you hit subscribe as we have got you covered for all your DFS needs. Fantasy Cruncher question. Do you change your number of uniques and or randomness by track? Mind sharing your settings for today?
I don't touch the uniques usually. I know some people do, but that's just a personal preference for me. But for randomness, if we're like at a track like Daytona or Talladega, I'll definitely up that a bit. But at a track like this, I do shift it up like 15%, but it's nothing too crazy at a 1.5 mile track because they're a little bit more predictable than other tracks.
Yeah, when I'm doing my crunches, if I'm saying I'm doing 150 lineups, I'm always usually I might do 3 unique drivers just to see. And a lot of time it's more of, I want to see what it spits out to me. If I don't like we talked about a little bit earlier, like in a race like today, I went in and set up a group of Dominators and saying, look, I want 2 of these drivers in everything. I think that's one of the big things in terms of NASCAR DFS with using Fantasy Cruncher to your benefit. So you are getting those type of builds that you want. We were talking about yesterday in the MMA show of like, you want 100% exposure to the main event. And so there was, 2 different ways you could do it. You could sit there and run a crunch where you lock in that one, fighter. So you can see all the lines that pop up. So that's how you have to use Fantasy Cruncher to your advantage.
Oh yeah, it's huge in NASCAR as well, especially if you're mass entering, just to make sure you have those certain rules right, because each track's going to have their own different rules.
Yeah, I mean, and today you got to have those Dominators. It'll be interesting once the race is over. In terms of the optimal lineup, is it a 2 or 3, or I wouldn't think it'd be 4, but maybe it could be. Who knows?
Certainly could.
So we'll of course, if you do have any questions, line those up over. If you ever do have any Fantasy Cruncher questions, be sure to hit us up about that. Favorite FanDuel faves?
Faves or fades?
Favorites.
Oh, sorry. It's kind of the similar guys. I like Kyle Larson a lot. It doesn't really matter what site he's on. I do think he's pretty much the top threat to dominate. Also like Martin Truex Jr. a lot as well. But I do like Ryan Blaney. And then Austin Cindric. The price is really low. I know there's a case we made to fade him in tournaments, but I think that's more so on DraftKings because of the price tag at nearly $9,000. Cindric on FanDuel at 62. I mean, almost feels like a free square, to be honest.
I feel like you're making a run for the Kyle Larson fan club president today. I mean, you're not leaving the Ryan Blaney fan club, are you?
Oh no, president of the Ryan Blaney fan club, but I'm a board of director or something on the Kyle Larson fan club.
Oh man. Kevin says need 1 driver, Austin Dillon, Tyler Reddick, or Alex Bowman. Well, I mean, I think right now with the news of Austin Dillon, I would scratch him out.
Yeah, I would between Tyler Reddick and Alex Bowman. I feel like Alex Bowman's got that higher ceiling because I think he could get up front and dominate. Obviously, he's not starting as far back, but overall, I think Alex Bowman there.
FanDuel GPP, Keselowski, Larson, and Kyle Busch together.
Yeah, as long as you can make that work and feel good about it, I have no issue with that whatsoever.
Custer or Newman on a FanDuel GPP?
I'll start with the Newman there. He's starting 1 spot further back, and Newman has shown the ability to have decent races here at Atlanta and high tire wear tracks.
Thoughts on Chase Briscoe?
He's someone I'm not getting a lot in my crunches. It's hard trusting these rookies, but he's in good equipment, and I like him. I don't love him, but I do have a decent exposure to him just because I'm not going to go 100% on guys like Newman and guys like Chastain in that range. So it's just kind of mixing and matching down there.
Blaney or Elliott in a single entry GPP?
That would have been a really tough question before we had the rear news. Now it's just kind of easier to go with Ryan Blaney there.
Thoughts on Ryan Preece?
So he's just one of those guys down low that I'm mixing and matching. I don't have strong opinions on anyone down low, maybe besides Anthony Alfredo. I like him the most out of all the super cheap drivers. Ryan Preece is a guy that has top 20 ability, and it's kind of as simple as that. He's just cheap, and you're going to differentiate down low.
Who's your favorite punt for place differential for a FanDuel single entry GPP?
Favorite punt over on FanDuel. Let's see. So punt, I'm assuming we're not getting down to the Joey Gases and Belickis of the world, but Anthony Alfredo over on FanDuel, he's still only $4,000. So it's kind of similar to DraftKings where I feel like he's a bit too cheap because he's actually only $500 more than a guy like Timmy Hill. So
yeah, I mean, I'm just looking kind of at the FanDuel salaries. You know, I mean, for Busher, you gotta go $1,500 more.
Yeah, and I feel like they can put up similar points today.
Yeah. See here. Sean asked about rear news. For if you have not heard, Chase Elliott to the back, Quinn Hoff, Timmy Hill also to the back as well. Last man in on DraftKings, Bowman, Cindric, or Reddick.
In cash games, it's going to be Cindric and then Reddick, Bowman. But in tournaments, I would have it backwards: Bowman, Reddick, Cindric.
Thoughts on Joey Logano?
Yeah, he's just one of those guys that haven't gotten talked about a lot today. So I'm wondering how low his ownership's actually going to be. I know he doesn't look like he's going to be too low owned according to ownership projections, but I do find it interesting. He hasn't been talked about like a lot today, but he's mainly a price play for me because I really like that front row of Hamlin and Truex. And at that point, I don't want to get like all in these guys starting in the top three because I like the guys starting a little bit further back as well. But he's a pure price play for me in tournaments.
Of course, March Madness is here. The tournament is underway, and we have got you covered over at Awesemo.com. If you're looking to get on some of the March Madness DFS, you can purchase our March Madness DFS package for $29.95. Gives you access to our college basketball projections for the entire tournament. And also be sure to check out our Odd Shopper tool at oddshopper.awesemo.com. Find the best value on a line. Could be the difference between a win and a loss. So make sure to take advantage of the free tool that we are offering. There you can see the package that we do have for college basketball as the tournament is going on. Of course, we do have games here today. And of course, the guys are doing shows at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time every day to get you ready for that day's tournament action. Of course, I'll be looking forward to, as a Noel, I'll be looking forward to tomorrow night as they take on Colorado. I had to sweat that one out a little bit yesterday afternoon. But yeah, so be sure to take advantage of that offer we have right now over at Awesemo.com. This over on FanDuel, Kyle Busch or Ryan Blaney?
I think we had that question earlier. I did start with Kyle Busch because he was starting further back.
If using Fantasy Cruncher, who's two drivers you lock on in a DraftKings GPP?
In GPP, I really like that Truex Larson combination today. It's really hard to get away from that.
Is playing Elliott a stupid idea?
No, I think it's smart, especially game theory wise, because if people are going to get off of him, I really don't think it's a big deal as going to the rear because I didn't think he was going to lead the first 25 laps anyway. So I'm not really too concerned.
New to DK NASCAR, is it bad to go Larson, Hamlin, and Truex? Does it limit upside?
The bad thing is they're all starting pretty close to the front, but just because they're all starting close to the front doesn't mean they all can't be good plays. Like we've seen plenty of times where the guys starting first and second can both dominate. Like it's not a rule that both those guys can't. So I don't think it's a terrible idea.
FanDuel GPP, Newman or Cindric?
Cindric for me.
Custer or Blaney in a GPP?
That's a massive price difference. So as long as price doesn't matter, definitely Blaney.
Yeah, I just kind of want to maybe go through some drivers that we really haven't talked about. Eric Amarola, who is starting 16th. He's 8,000 on both sites.
Yeah, my projections weren't really liking Amarola too much today, so I actually kind of manually bumped him up a little bit because I want some exposure to Amarola because we know he's a good driver. He can get top 15s, top 10s, and actually out of the past 6 races here, he has 4 top 15s. So I'd be surprised if he's not a top 15 contender. The problem is, like we were talking about Matt DiBenedetto, he's priced in that 8K range where there's so many good drivers there, it's hard to get to him. So he's kind of a guy he's kind of like filling in at the bottom of my fantasy cruncher builds, but it's nothing. I'm not really against him by any means.
Bubba Wallace starting 15th.
So he's in pretty much a Joe Gibbs car. I don't think it's as good as the actual Joe Gibbs car, but it's kind of like their extension team, kind of like with Wood Brothers, where they're pretty much a Penske car. The thing is, he hasn't had the best of runs so far this year. Now, last week, he was looking like a top 10 guy, ended up having a weird pit strategy where he stayed out. Obviously, it didn't work out because he had old tires. Problem is $7,400 starting 15th. I feel like he's going to finish right around there. And at that point, I'd rather get down to a little bit cheaper with a guy like Ryan Newman, Briscoe, those kind of guys.
Rosh Chastain starting 21st, 6,600 on TK, 5,500 over on FanDuel.
So if you're looking at the numbers at Atlanta, don't do that similar to MDB because he was an absolute junk equipment here before. But now that he's in the 42 guard where we've seen Kyle Larson have a ton of success here, I definitely think there's some upside. Now he's an aggressive driver, so you got to be a little bit careful with him, but there's certainly top 15 potential here from Chastain at a really cheap price point.
Favorite drivers on Superdraft?
So I know earlier we were talking about the multiplier with Austin Cindric. I think that's pretty appealing, but it's going to be a similar because I think just because we're on a different side doesn't mean I think someone else is going to dominate. So it's kind of that Kyle Larson, Truex, Ryan Blaney, that trio. Yep.
Yeah, I kind of feel like Kyle Larson would be the kind of the guy to start with.
Yeah, for sure.
Asking for your thoughts on a 3 Dominator build of Harvick, Larson, and Truex.
Yeah, that's totally fine. I'm pretty sure actually one of my 3 max lineups does include that. So I'm definitely a fan of that today.
And for people who are coming in here late, drivers going to the back, most notably Chase Elliott going to the back. The other 2 going to the back are Timmy Hill and Quinn Hoff, which doesn't really affect anything. McDowell or Priest, or drop down to the LaJoy Alfredo range and leave money on the table.
I kind of just like getting some money on the table there, get Alfredo in.
Oliver says, I've got 5,000 salary left over on DraftKings. Is that too much in tournaments?
Yeah, because when you were talking, I don't know if you just got in here, but I think the lowest I had was 49,500. So I definitely would try to figure something else out. I'd be curious to see what that lineup is.
That's what I was thinking. I'm like, okay, that's got to be like a 3 Dominator build, 2 punts, and then a mid-range, maybe?
Or they just completely faded the Dominators, something like that.
Man. Yeah, I mean, look, you've got to have at least 2 Dominators.
Yes, 100%.
That's the starting. Like, to me, if you're hand building lineups, that's where it's got to start.
Yes.
Pick 2 Dominators and then go from there.
Yeah, because you don't want to get to the bottom of your lineup and like you only have money for 1 Dominator. Like you got to start with those guys just to make sure you have them.
Yeah. Busher or Priest on DraftKings?
Busher for me.
Blaney or Logano?
I like Blaney more. He's starting further back and he's also a little bit cheaper as well. So, I mean, the place differential there just makes him a better play in my opinion.
Yeah, of course. If you do have any questions, we got just a couple more minutes here left in the show. So get those questions in. Of course, be sure to check out our sponsor, Monkey Knife Fight, their player prop-based contest they have over there for today's NASCAR. You can check that out. Also, be sure to use that promo code Awesemo for a 100% instant match deposit up to $50. DK single entry favorite driver, 64 and under, not named Ricky Stenhouse Jr.
Not named Ricky Stenhouse. So if you're getting down to the 5K range, I like Anthony Alfredo quite a bit, but overall, Chris Buescher looks like the most appealing play there. I know it's a little bit risky starting 17th, but I think he's got legitimate top 15 potential.
If you're playing 4 Dominators, is it okay to play BJ and Ware today?
If you're doing 4 Dominators, I'm personally liking the cheaper Dominators to mix in, so I'm not getting down there because when I was doing a 4 Dominator build, my 2 cheap drivers were LaJoy and Alfredo, which I don't feel bad about. I think those are 2 viable cheap options today. But once I get to that McLeod, I forget the other guy you mentioned, but like it really matters. I don't really want to go down that low today.
Yeah. I mentioned this question yesterday on terms of Harvick because I want to say yesterday when I did Crunch, he was by far the Dominator that was coming up the most for me. What is too much Kevin Harvick today?
So ownership-wise, it's looking like he's going to be pushing for one of the, if not the highest owned driver, right up there with Martin Truex Jr. I think in years past, you could feel pretty comfortable going like 60, 70, 80% Kevin Harvick because that's just how good he's been in Atlanta. This year, since he's kind of not showing that dominant ability yet, I almost feel like maxing that out around that 50-ish range is probably where you want to be.
Keselowski or Larson FanDuel GPP?
It's going to be Larson for me.
If you had to pick below 5,100, would it be Bilicki?
Starting 37th. I mean, Timmy Hill's got to do that pass through. So, I mean, that just kind of gets him out of there. So I guess Balicki, if you have to go that low, I don't want to, but if you have to, he's starting 37th.
Sean goes, "Hey Chris, just curious, when was the last time you didn't roster your boy Blaney?" Just kidding. Keep up the great work.
I don't know though. For real, I think I've rostered him every slate ever since I can remember.
I guess the question would be like, when's the last time you've had like less than, say, 15% Ryan Blaney?
Might have been the championship race last year because he wasn't in the Final Four. So I guess that was the only time I felt good not having much Ryan Blaney.
Chastain or Stenhouse, DraftKings GPP?
Chastain for me, starting further back.
Busher or Custer, DraftKings?
Custer.
Are you using any Elliott? If so, how much?
I'm in that 20 to 25% range. I was a little bit higher before the race, but now that he's going to the rear, I dropped it a little bit.
We'll get to one more question here about William Byron, and kind of obviously he's in that Dominator field. I guess the question is really, how much do you want to get to him?
I'm not going to have an overabundance of William Byron. I know he was really strong at Homestead, which is a pretty similar track to Atlanta. The problem is if you have so much William Byron, it's going to take away from guys like Blaney, Bowman, Cindric, Reddick, which I don't want to do. So I'm trying to find an even balance there, kind of in that 10 to 20% range.
Of course, appreciate everyone that was in here on a Sunday afternoon. Next Sunday for the race, Phil will be joining us, as we will not have a strategy show on Saturday because, well, when you typically do the strategy show on Saturdays, we would already know where the drivers are starting. We're not going to know that, so the three of us will be here next Sunday to help you break down and then develop those rosters. Of course, good luck to everyone today. Be sure to keep it locked here to Awesemo today. Next show will be here in 2 hours. 2 hours from now. I had to do a little math there. It will be NBA Deeper Dive with myself and Terry. Then NBA Live Before Lock with EMAC and Greg. And special thanks goes to our sponsor, Monkey Knife Fight. Good luck today, and we will talk to you next week for the NASCAR Live Before Lock show right here on Awesemo.com.